The only way to do this is to stand in front of your scene and see it more as a painting and not so much as a boat, tugboat, fishing boat, maroon. Wonderful picture, but we want to see it as a painting. So directional lines are important. So I'm going with the sweep of the curvilinear, the diagonal, leading towards what will eventually be center of interest, and I'm going to aim for the little boat under the pavilion there, and then the diagonal reinforcement of the building that is above it. So I have down in this area, just pretty much where you can see the seals, that'll be where this boat is, and it will be a focal, and I will tie the whole thing together right there. The building here, and the diagonal of the building above, the end of the pier, not as much. It's wonderful to be an artist because you can leave things out. And essentially, you can move mountains, move pilings, watch for the little tugboat going out and say, yes, I can use that later, so I'll remember it. And it'll go in here. And then that fishing boat, more than likely, as soon as I get ready to paint it, it will go away. So I have to remember that it was there and kind of remember what it looks like. So in a minute I will do some sketching with my brush to lock in these shapes. But for the moment I'm just blocking it out and saying, wow, this is great. And I've got a lighthouse over here, artificial, but we'll make it for real, and it will be up there. Okay, so the next step is to look for the clouds that aren't here. The clouds that were here yesterday. Wonderful. They're behind me at the moment, but the sun is where it ought to be. It's behind me. And the clouds are obscured by the brilliance of the sun, so I will take a quick look and say, there they are. Yes, I can do that. And I'll come back over here and I'll move them a few billion miles and they'll be over here. That works for me. This is a quiet moment early in the morning, except for the seals. You can see the French ultramarine on the surface. Lighter weight paper would never handle this well. The 140 paper has to be stretched, especially out of doors, because a gust of wind will carry it away. But this paper will stay pretty much where it belongs. Alright, that works. I started this picture without sketching. I love to sketch with my brush. The spatters are going to add a lot to it. So spattering with an old toothbrush, you could pick up the pigment. The rendering for the sky has been complete, and once a sky or a full wash is done, it has to be left. It is what it is, and success is in the first strokes. If one fails to have an open, easy wash that just flows, then the painting will be contrived and less effective, and the artist will probably turn the paper over and paint on the other side. And how many times I've done that. So the next step here is to do the water, and the reflections under the chosen objects form the next set of patterns. And there's so much going on here. the moving of the water, the changing of the sky, the reflections, the patterns of the buoys and the docks. And this whole thing has to be done and captured in a few moments. There are rocks further off to the left, and yes, I believe they are significant. So what I'm going to do is to begin the patterns that will develop the shoreline, and I am going to use the rock patterns instead of all the pilings. And I'm not sure at this point, because I have chosen to do this painting in a little different way. I'm bringing elements into the picture. So now I'm adding to the mix so tasty raw sienna and Prussian blue. And I don't want to hesitate to bring in strength of current and water. And the shoreline itself is going to be right over here, and it will be done with the same two colors, leaning more to the raw sienna. But these strokes also have to be done with open pattern and a sense of perspective and a precision that would say that the whole scene is going to be captured with the mood of the morning. And later the birds and the various objects will be identified. So first we have the reflections in the water. At this point in the rendering, it's possible to begin laying in color, and it will set and it won't bleed as much. In the early stages, the bleeding is very difficult to control because of the wetness of the paper. So now I will center in on the ship that is going to be located underneath the piling in this location. And I'm using 1/4 inch and 1/8 of an inch flat, and I'm going to establish the position of the little tugboat that is under the pier. And I will do this with lost and found edge and shades and shadows, and I'm going to use some Viridian green, Payne's gray, and establish the position of the ship. There's a shade side which is decidedly on the left, and the sun moving on the right. So I'm going to come back in and do the negative shape in behind the ship with Payne's gray. And I'm going to start middle value. It still hasn't set in yet, so I'm still in light to middle value. I have not moved it in value yet, but I will very soon. There's still a bleed, so I'm not quite ready to lock in the shapes. But we want this to be blended, and I will drop a perspective line using the piers. And some of the pilings will come further out. Again, it's still on a bleed, and it's early morning, so it's not drying really fast. Now I want to do a diagonal on the pier. It's still on a wash, kind of a light value wash. Choosing to do one of the pilings out here and another one further out, which I haven't done yet because it's still a little too wet, and some of the wonderful slanted roofs over here. I have not set the lighthouse in, but I will in a moment. I'm choosing to sketch with brush, and I'm looking for lost and found edges. I'm looking for reflective light. I'm looking for textural opportunities. And I'm working with a relatively small 1/8 of an inch brush. And there's wonderful patterns. Moving to do a lost and found edge, choosing Prussian blue and cadmium yellow for green. I love to mix greens with the blue and the yellow. And so now I will begin that. Again, this is the lost and found edge for the background. Still on not dark, but middle value. So now the little trees can be set up, and I begin to see that there is a settling of the pigment, and the runs are less, and the control is so much better. As the painting begins to dry, then we have opportunity to set in the details, and we go back in to the specific lost and found edges that will establish what I've decreed to be the center of interest. This would be actually the tugboat right near where the seals are playing and having a heyday, and so we'll call this Monterey, the Seals Playground, and I think this will be a great title for this little rendering. And so I'm aiming at the docked fishing boat under the pier and bringing this into middle value. And I'm using a card, which is my favorite thing to use, just the corner of a card, and I'm able to make very quick, clean strokes with that. So I'm going to show how that works by going above into the area that has been now sufficiently dried so that these strokes will create the masts and posts and various clean and neat things that will give a very sharp effect to the painting. And I will look around, and the place where I'm going to place the little lighthouse is up here on the top of this building, which I've decided would not be a center of interest, although it's a very interesting part of the painting and a wonderful landmark, I'm sure. But I prefer to move the center of interest further out onto the end of the pier. So now, being that it's beginning to dry, I'm able to establish the cleanup of the lost and found edges. Now those clouds seem to be floating in from behind me, and they're now there, which is distinctively what the painting began to be. And I'm at this point going to place the little lighthouse in, and I'm also going to finish the water area. So I'm using horizontal strokes to show the perspective and the movement of this little bay that I've been lightly adding to with the granules of pigment, French ultramarine pigment, that come from spattering. And then I've enhanced the strength of the color of the rocks and the shoreline in the immediate foreground. This is not quite completed, but it's almost at a completion point in that area of the picture. And now I'll go back up into the reflections from the pier and add a bit more pigment from the French ultramarine blue and into the water, and smaller ripples to indicate the perspective point that is back here. And just under that vessel. So this being Monterey, it's Fisherman's Wharf, and there's just incredible activity and action and life and vibrance. And in the final stages of a plein air watercolor painting, you are actually chasing the sun if you are working too long. And so at this point, I'm doing a simple wrap-up of just highlighting some of the lost and found edges, bringing in a few darks, making sure that I have rendered some clean washes in the darker areas, and there could be an opportunity to bring and enhance into the darker third value. But given the moving of the sun and the time that we have, this seems to be an appropriate moment to bring to conclusion.